Hi, I'm King Drell, and I want to be starting something like a Michael spoiler review. So I went to the theaters to see the Michael movie twice. So now it's time for me to sit down and give you my complete and honest spoiler review of the movie. I'm gonna give you the things I liked about the movie, and I'm gonna give you the things that I didn't like as much about the movie. But anyway, let's get into it. Now, again, before I start, I really need to preference, guys. This is called the Michael movie, not a Jackson's movie, a Michael movie. We had a movie already that I'm sure a lot of people know about that was a Jackson's movie. So if you were expecting coming into this movie, seeing anything about the other siblings, which ones that were actually in this movie, you would be sadly disappointed because this movie was absolutely about Michael Jackson. Michael is in like every scene except that one scene, but I'll get to that in a minute. If you're gonna have a Michael movie, the first thing you got to start with is your Michael Jackson himself. And we had two versions in this. We had Kid Michael, played by Giuliano Valdi, and of course, we had Adult Michael, played by Jermaine's son, Jafar Jackson. And when I say both of them absolutely stole this movie, the best part about a Michael movie may actually be Michael himself, because as Kid Michael, he was just as adorable, but most importantly, the James Brown moves, like the dancing that he was doing, you could tell that he definitely studied Michael, studied everything, like the facial expressions, just everything. I would say that it was an absolutely amazing performance. But as great as he was as young Michael, Jafar, as adult Michael, I'm gonna put it this way, guys, if you were to close your eyes and just listen to him talk in this movie, you would swear it was Michael himself. Like he had the voice down perfect. The dance moves, I know they heard he was talking about how he practiced those moves so much. I think there might have even been an injury or something like that. But the final performance, and I'll get to more of that a little bit later, but the final performance was one of my favorite things I liked watching in this entire movie. I really like how they went a little bit into Michael and Barry Gordy's relationship. You know, they had the scene at the studio where he's showing Michael how to work a lot of the production and things, and even kind of putting Joe in his place, letting him know it's like, hey, anytime you want to come and ask me anything, you just go right ahead. There was like a couple of times in this, like even when he had to let Joe know when Michael was in the booth and he kept moving his feet every time he tried to do the song, and with every time they kept stopping him, it's like, Mike, you can't keep moving your feet. You got to be still. We got to record this. And at one point, Joe's like, man, let me go in that 5 minutes. Man, Barry's just like, look, you let us worry about how we do this around here. And that always kind of talks about the dynamic that Michael always talked about between Barry Gordy himself and, of course, his father. I know this is called a Michael movie, but this could just as easily been called Michael versus Joe, because this entire movie's thread line is basically Michael Jackson's journey to break away from his father. Not just break away from his brothers, but it seemed like to break away from his father, the control he had. Like they had the whole scene where he was talking about how he wanted to go solo, and he was like, I'm just gonna look at him right in the face and I'm gonna let him know that I want to do a solo album and do my own thing. And then the very next scene, he's just sitting with them and it's like, so I think it would be better if it came from you guys. Why don't you let Joe know that I want to do a solo album? I don't really need to do that. And they kind of played that up so a lot of different times. Like there's a point later in the movie, like going into the real solo part, after Off the Wall and everything, there was a scene where Joe was trying to capitalize off of Michael's success by putting out another Jackson's tour, another Jackson's album, everything with his brothers. And he didn't want to do that. He kind of wanted to do his own thing. It's like when they have the scene, and of course we know Miles Teller is John Branca in the movie, and they have a whole scene where when he's sitting down having the meeting because he's trying to break off and do his own thing, and he hires Mr. Branca, and he's like, all right, now that you work for me, the first thing I need you to do is fire Joseph. And he's like, so how would you like him to do that? And he leans in, he's like, quickly. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. It's like this entire movie. Then when you get to the end with the whole victory tour, situation where you got Joe in the back talking about how he's going to take this on all the different countries and continents and be this global tour. And of course, we know it's a very infamous scene, guys, where he's in the end of the victory tour and he pretty much announces that he's leaving the group and going solo live on stage. And the reason all of this is prevalent about Michael versus Joe, because like I said earlier, there's literally like one scene in this movie that Michael's not in. And it is a whole scene with Joe Jackson and Don King setting up the victory tour. And when they're setting up this tour, it's like it sometimes they made Joe kind of seem like, yes, he was really hard, and of course he was really selfish and things, but at other times in this movie, they basically portrayed Joe like a supervillain. This man, the man had his head burned, almost could have died. They're at the hospital, and Joe comes in and he's basically like, so yeah, that's sad and everything. How long before he can get back on stage? Even his family's looking at him like, whoa. It's like, nah, look, talk about I know my boy. And I think the place that makes him feel good is out there on stage. Nah, you didn't want to mess up that victory tour money. Like the entire meeting with Joe and Don King, I swear, Joe did everything but rub his hands together and twirl his mustache. Like that's how much of a villain they were making him out to be. They definitely did portray a lot of the different sides of Michael, which they never really addressed in movies before. They did touch on his vertigo, his skin condition, and I love how they didn't really put a lot of attention on it. Like he kind of mentions it when he's at the doctor and when he's there to do his nose job, which they also go into in this movie. But throughout the movie, you just kind of see him subtly, just kind of dabbing his face and little parts of his body just to kind of make sure he's keeping the makeup covered up to make sure he looks the way he does. And like I said, they don't bring a lot of attention to it. It's just something that they do subtly. And honestly, I kind of think that was the best way to go. They also do bring up, more of the weirder sides to Michael. They brought up all of his, well, he calls them his friends, but all of his pets. They got the big one scene where he actually introduces the family to Bubbles, which of course he's going to get a big spot because if anybody knows anything about Michael, they know about Bubbles. So they made sure Bubbles got a very grand entrance in this movie. They really did play up in this movie about how he didn't really have a childhood. He has a lot of scenes where he's watching TV with his mom, Catherine, played by the lovely Nia Long. And even the scenes where, she's talking about why don't you have other kids your age you want to play with? And he brings up, like, they don't really want to be my friends. They just kind of want to stare at me and ask for autographs. So they really did kind of touch on him not having friends. And then as he got older, he stayed a kid at heart, reading a lot of Peter Pan, Wizard of Oz, stuff like that. There's a big scene that, of course, a lot of people's talking about when he comes home and his brothers are playing basketball and he wants to play Twister. Yes, Twister. And of course, they don't want to play Twister. They want to do quote unquote adult things. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room real quick. There are not a lot of Jackson siblings in here. We know Catherine had 9 kids, the 6 boys and the 3 girls, and most of them are here. It's like if you love Latoya, you'll see a lot of Latoya. I know a lot of people knew going in that Janet was probably not going to be in this movie, which probably wouldn't have been as glaring if Latoya wasn't in half the movie. Reeby's not in this movie either. But what really surprised me the most was the one Jackson that wasn't in this movie. And I found myself saying,
"Where's Randy?"
We all know Randy, the guy who eventually joined the Jackson 5 when Jermaine didn't leave Motown with the rest of him. Yeah, he's nowhere to be found in this movie. And it was kind of glaring when you get to the end and they're on the victory tour, the tour that we know that all 6 brothers were on, and there's only 5 brothers up there. It's like, I don't know who Randy pissed off, but to be able to do, I know it's a Michael movie again, but Randy was a part of the group at the end, and then not to have a Randy representation in this movie, knowing he was actually a part of the group, was a little wild to me. I'm gonna be honest with you. I like how deep they kind of went into some of the making of his music videos. They go through the whole process of him getting the gangs together for the Beat It video, him going down there, talking to them, and just rehearsing with them. I thought that was really cool. They did the same thing with the Thriller video itself. And leading into that, of course, they also have the whole meeting about them trying to get his videos on MTV and what was a really big scene in the movie where they really spoke out to people there at MTV about, hey, you get Billie Jean playing in the next 10 minutes or I'm pulling everybody off of that station. The things that they did tell about Michael, they told them really, really well. But now I guess I would have to say I have to get into the things that were kind of like, uh, the not so good things about the movie, I guess I would say. Let's just get the first one out the way right now. There, of course, there's some inaccuracies in this movie. There's going to be things people point at and be like, that's not how that went. That's not how that went. Or they didn't really say that. And that's with any movie. No one's ever going to have the exact same dialogue as long as you kind of have an idea of what happened. Movie magic dictates that this is the story they're trying to tell. But from the very beginning of the movie, it was kind of telling to me, listening to them perform Jackson 5 songs that they recorded with Motown before they even signed with Motown. Like they're literally on stage singing, I believe it was Never Can Say Goodbye, when the representative of Motown walks up and starts talking to Joe, talking about, hey, here's my card. You know, they're really good. And I'm like, they're singing Motown songs on stage. So yeah, that was probably one of the biggest glaring inaccuracies that I kind of had with the movie, you know, because they just wanted to make sure that they played Michael's music. They play Michael's music a lot. You could kind of tell that this movie, I mean, it was released by the state, mind you. This movie is a giant commercial for Michael Jackson's music. Like at the end of the day, to sum this whole thing up, this movie is a giant commercial for his music. It just so happens that me being a gigantic Michael fan, I'm here for it. So that's why that didn't really bother me as much, but it was kind of glaring that every like second it was like, oh, okay, another Michael song. Like I like them, but man, it's a lot of Michael Jackson music in this thing. They go over a lot of Michael. You could tell that they really didn't want to paint Michael in any kind of negative light. They really wanted to paint him as, you know, what we know him as: super talented, super sweet, great with kids, you know, a little strange. You know, the things he had with his skin condition, the struggles of how he was raised growing up. You know, it seems like they really, and I remember Paris said that they really only show a side of Michael that's going to cater to a certain part of his audience. And in a way, I could kind of see that because look, guys, Michael wasn't perfect. In fact, Michael was kind of shrewd. I kind of went over a lot of the things that they covered about Michael during the time period that they covered. But you know what they didn't cover in this movie? They didn't cover him screwing over Paul McCartney by undercutting him and buying his music. You know, they didn't cover any of the stuff with Prince. You know, there were things that they did not cover because they might make Michael look in a way of, man, you know, Michael can be a little low down sometimes. And without saying it, Michael could be a little a-hole sometimes too. They did not portray any of that in this movie. I can tell you that right now. Also, I hope you like Bill Bray, Michael's bodyguard, because from the moment that he is introduced as his bodyguard in this movie, him and Michael are inseparable the remainder of this movie. Now you can say, well, yes, he's his bodyguard. Yeah, he probably was there around him all the time. But no, Bill Bray basically becomes a co-star, guys. And while I didn't hate his character, I did feel like there was a little much of him. Like he's the one that was basically giving Michael all of his advice and stuff in the movie. Like even having him be the one at the end when Michael finally walked away from his father to kind of lean in and be like, hey man, hey Joe, it's over. And just kind of walk off. It's like they made it really seem, and who knows, maybe that was true, but they really made it seem like he was the most important person in Michael's life. I know a lot of people are going to compare it to the old movie that we had about Michael Jackson, not that Man in the Mirror or whatever that crap it is, the American Dream. We know the one, And it's kind of hard not to make those comparisons because number one, it's another story that involves Michael, but they also pretty much end at the same place. That other movie ended at the end of the Victory Tour. This movie kind of ends at the end of the Victory Tour. I know he does the whole bad performance after it, and that's the actual final scene. But as far as the story they were telling, it pretty much ends at the end of the Victory Tour. So these movies basically end at the same place. But if it had to end there, and as long as we got that bad performance after it, which of course is my favorite thing in the entire movie, I'm glad we got it because I could not sit through that both times I watched it without singing and dancing along. So I'm just glad that the theater I was in was on the same vibe that I was on. Because if you go to a Michael movie, you have to be on that vibe. This is like a concert. I know that I'd seen some people talk about how they thought it just seemed like it just ended. I've kind of felt that way too. In fact, another big problem I kind of had was they sometimes it seemed like they rushed through moments of his life to get to the next one, to get to the next one. It's like, okay, he's a kid. They do a couple of performances. Okay, now he's an adult and he's doing Off the Wall, and now he needs to break away from his father. And now we're doing Thriller, and they got the Pepsi commercial. They got Motown 25. It just seems like they kind of go through everything. But I can say that at the time that I'm recording this, they have announced a sequel to Michael. So it looks like we are going to get more of his story. So that is a good thing. And overall, I did enjoy this movie. I can tell you right now, I don't know. I imagine that Michael 2 will probably take place maybe going into the Bad album since we already did the Bad tour. So in Michael sequel, they do have a chance to touch on those things that people were worried about whether they would touch on the first one or not. Like the scandals and the court cases that he had going on. I will be interested to see if they bring up Jermaine Jackson's diss track to his own brother or Latoya just completely throwing him under the bus because with family like them, like, oh boy, you wonder why he always wanted to be alone. I do kind of grade this on a curve as being like a enormous Michael Jackson fan. Again, I know I had some problems with it, but overall, I completely enjoyed this movie. I would give it a 7.5, somewhere between a 7.5 and an 8 out of 10. I can't really give it much more than that because of the problems that I had, which is why I had to knock it down. But yeah, somewhere between a 7.5 and an 8 out of 10. But again, I did enjoy the Michael movie. I think if you're a Michael Jackson fan, you should definitely go check out the Michael movie if you haven't already. So definitely let me know in the comments what you thought about the movie and let me know if you plan on watching it. But until then, this is King Drell, and I will see you guys next time.